Benjamin Howard joins me on Queerly Radio to tell us all about his new film Riley, which is premiering at the BFI Flair. Thanks so much for being on the show. Could you introduce us to Riley and tell us what it's all about?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. Riley is a coming of age movie about really a high school football player who's struggling to come to terms with his sexuality.
Mm.
And it's a kind of an exploration of his relationships with his friends and his teammates, his girlfriend, his parents, but I would say most importantly with himself.
And you created this film from your own adolescent experiences because you played in a football team for 4 years. Why did you want to share this story? I'd imagine it must have taken a lot out of you to go back over some of those moments in your life as well.
Yeah, it's a kind of a tricky thing. It was cathartic. It was a really cathartic process for me to draft the script, but with that catharsis also came some anxiety about, re-exploring these moments and kind of opening up some of these wounds again in order to explore what it was that I wanted to explore here. But football was my life back then. It was my whole thing. It was what I wanted to do, and when these feelings inside of me that were obviously uncontrollable were starting to come up, it was a bit of a, I don't know, a roadblock where, okay, is this what I want to do? And yes, I could be, openly gay and still play football, but
Yeah.
it seemed too much for me to really sink my teeth into, and I knew I needed to figure myself out before I could really, determine what it was that I wanted to do next. And so going kind of through a lot of that as I wrote was it was interesting, but it was fun and very cathartic.
And the film had a lot to say about hookup culture as well, particularly in gay relationships and that pressure to have experience when you're dating for the first time. Your portrayal of what Riley experiences felt so honest. What are you hoping audiences take away from this film, and who are you hoping that the film reaches when it's out?
It's a great question. I've been so pleasantly kind of surprised at the reaction that the film has gotten from a wide variety of audiences, gay or straight, or otherwise, and folks of all ages too. We've had just different types of people come up to us after watching it, oftentimes tears in their eyes, and they say, "Thank you for telling the story." And it just catches me off guard every time because, I wanted to write something truthful as an out gay man. I just wanted to write my experience, and I think a lot of out gay men are going to resonate with it. But I've been just surprised at how many other types of folks have resonated with the story. And I think it's just because they see themselves in this character who's just trying to figure out what life is all about, what they are all about, who they are as a person, as a human being. And I think that's what kind of makes the character relatable, and people see themselves in it. So what started out as what I thought was just going to be this cool little queer movie that queer audiences might appreciate seems to have turned into something that I think all sorts of people can appreciate.
And in the film, Riley is battling with liking his male friends romantically too. So you see his relationship with Jaden, who's also on the football team. Thinking about how those relationships are often portrayed in films, do you think the industry still has a long way to go before we see more honest representation on screen?
I think so. I think, the idea of coming out movies, quote unquote, is maybe going to be a thing, a relic of cinema's past at some point. I don't know that we're there just yet. And I think kind of the harsh reality is that these portrayals and the types of characters, or specifically the character in this film, is struggling, and we need to be able to see those portrayals because people are struggling, especially young people, especially young queer athletes are struggling. And so I think what we wanted to do was to highlight that experience, and just to kind of to shine a light on it, to tell them that they're not alone, that
Mhm.
there's a lot of other people just like you, just like I was, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And I don't think it helps that currently there's only one openly gay NFL player. I think that's right. So, do you think that because in the film, the culture surrounding the college football team was portrayed to be quite toxic, I'd imagine that reflects your own experiences. But do you think the NFL and college football teams need to be doing more to combat that culture and so that players do feel like they can be themselves more and be comfortable with who they are and coming out if they need to?
I think it's so interesting because the NFL has done, certain things to encourage a more accepting culture. They've taken a lot of social kind of movements and embraced some of them, and I have seen some of that embraced with, for the queer community. Um, so I would almost ponder that it's the players themselves that are feeling like
Yeah.
they can't be a certain version of themselves, because that's what I was, and I think that's what Riley is. For me personally, I just didn't know. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure if I was allowed to. But once I knew, and once I was had that self affirmation, then I was like, okay, that's who I am. Great, I'm going to own that. And I would kind of think that probably, it's a self issue with some of the players, because there's obviously, you know, some closeted NFL athletes and college athletes that are currently playing. We just don't know who they are, because I think they aren't quite ready to live as truthfully as they can. And I don't know. Our hope is that this film kind of shines a little bit of a light on that and says you're good to go. It's okay.
Absolutely. And you cast Jake Holly in the lead role. He's incredible. How did you know he was right to play that part?
I mean, the easy answer is that I had seen what he has done as a performer prior to making this film. We did a short film called Rendezvous. It was kind of our proof of concept, and I met him on that through our casting director, Paul Ruddy. So we had Jake come in for that short. He just absolutely knocked it out of the park. He goes to just such a deep place with characters, and he invests every part of himself into the roles that he plays, and he doesn't just dip his toes and test the waters. He just dives right in. And I knew, I knew that he did that with the short. I knew when it came time to cast the feature that he had absolutely set the highest bar. We did do a little casting call for the lead, but I knew, like, Jake is the guy, and if no one comes close to that, to that
Mhm.
bar that he set, I'm going right back to him. Lo and behold, we didn't really quite find anyone that worked as well as Jake did. He is a phenomenal actor, and has been such a joy to have, by my side through production, and even now through, the festival run. He's just such a champion of the film, of telling the story, and I look forward to working with him down the line for sure.
The film ends more optimistically, but it feels like it's just the start of Riley's journey coming to terms with who he is as well. Was that true of your own experiences after you decided to come out? Did it take a long time? Definitely did for me.
I mean, like I said, it was a matter of kind of going through all the strife and the difficulties and the secret hookups and like these awkward relationships with my girlfriends and some of the sleepover stuff with friends, right?
Yeah.
And that was so internal, and I was wondering, is this all okay? And I was being told it really wasn't. I saw a therapist. I was with a therapist for about a year, and once I kind of collected all this data, because my brain can sometimes work in that type of ones and zeros way, just like collect the data and then make a decision. And once I had enough data to kind of bring back to this therapist, he said, "It sounds like, Ben, it sounds like you're gay." Yeah. I said, "Okay, cool. That's what I needed to hear. I thought that was the case, but I'm being told by so many folks that you're not allowed to be that or whatever." But he kind of gave me that affirmation that I needed, and it's kind of reflected in a scene towards the end of the film where Riley gets a little bit of that, and that's kind of what I got a bit. And from then, it was just a matter of doing the thing, going to friends and say, "Hey, I need to talk to you. I need to sit down and tell you something." And I did that in a series of meetups at a Denny's in Rancho San
Hmm.
Diego. And every time I drive by that Denny's now, it sparks these fun kind of memories of
Yeah.
just being able to be a truthful version of myself.
And you went from being a record-breaking football player in high school to then going into filmmaking. And I'm so glad you did because you made this incredible film. But what was the moment when you realized that film was what you wanted to go into instead?
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. I will say the 4 touchdowns I scored in one game in high school is a high that I still haven't come down from. No, I'm just kidding. But the filmmaking element came into play my senior year of high school. Actually, I wrote and directed a short film asking my date to prom. I was still deeply closeted at that point, but I went to prom with Maddie Hauser, this wonderful girl I had a crush on back then, and so I asked her to prom with this short film that I wrote and directed, and people saw the short, and parents particularly, and they didn't just think it was this cute little thing that had been made. They said
Mhm.
this was actually very technically well done. You should do this, and it wasn't really until that affirmation that I decided, okay, maybe this is something I could pursue because I loved doing it. I love being on set. I love, being around cameras and talking to actors and playing pretend. And I think it's important and it's a wonderful thing that you can, do to make a difference. And it was kind of from that short film that I decided, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to try and pursue this.
Amazing. And for anyone watching Riley who's maybe struggling to accept themselves, what would you say to them? Do you have any advice?
I want to tell them that they are not alone. That's really kind of the driving message that I want to communicate, especially to young closeted athletes. I want them to know that they are not alone. I went through the same exact thing. There are so many people going through exactly the same thing, and it's going to be okay. And you got to be able to work through it in your own way, and that's totally fine. But I want the film to kind of be it's a reflection of what I went through, and I ended up just fine
Yeah.
too. So I hope the film is able to offer some sort of hope to folks struggling with themselves.
And if you could go back and speak to your younger self in high school when you were part of that football team, what would you say looking at how far you've come now?
Uh, that's such a fun question because I think about that as often. I think about it. I think about being back in high school probably more than I should
Yeah.
at this point. But I guess making a film about it, puts your headspace there. Honestly, if I could go back, I'd go back to my freshman or sophomore year and I'd say, "Yo, here's the thing. You're gay, and you probably have an idea of that right now, but it's not going to go away, and that's okay. So lean into it because you're all
Hmm.
good." And I just think it would have been such an interesting thing for me to have been comfortable coming out, or much earlier than I did come
Yeah.
out my freshman sophomore year of high school. And then I would have been that, I don't know, that player on the team that was openly, gay and truthful with who he was. And where I grew up, that was not going to be the case. You just would never see that. I don't even know that you'd see it much these days. At least on the football team. But if I could go back, I would tell myself, "Hey, this is the situation, and it's not a situation. This is just your life. So lean into
Yeah.
it because you're going to be okay."
Thank you so much for this film. I hope that as many people get to see it as possible. I loved it. What are you working on next?
Next, we down the pipeline. I'm in development on another script. It's kind of an exploration of the hedonism LA's gay porn scene. It's a little nod to my favorite movie, Boogie Nights. So we'll see if that's able to take off. But in the meantime, we are just stoked to get to London. We're stoked to be in London and represent this film. And yeah,
Good luck with BFI Flair next week, and thank you so much for your time as well. It's been lovely to chat.
likewise. Thank you so much, Harvey.